Hey, what's going on, Lindsay? Hey, everybody.
Hey,
Perfect.
how are you?
Everyone, my name is Josh Opatz. I'm good. How are you?
Good.
So I'm one of the owners here at Young Yonder Spirits in Hillsburg, California, up in Sonoma County. And today we're going to do a virtual tour, and then the tasting will follow after. So
Yeah.
come on in. Let's go inside and check this place out.
Great.
All right, I'm gonna flip around here. So welcome to our tasting room. So this is basically the first thing you'd experience in coming through our door here. So we have a pretty open, modern industrial concept. We do tastings, we do tours, we do cocktails, all sorts of fun educational stuff. Everything from retail to our tasting bar here. Always have fun music and visual stimulation going on here. And then we also have our extended seating area. So we'll go over here, show you guys the space a little bit. So super fun usually have a cornhole set, in this area here for people to play games during the summer, and try to keep it lively and fun. So plenty of seating. We do a lot of events and stuff in here. So fun to have the room to spread out. So we're basically leaving the tasting room area now. We're going to go into our production area. So our floor plan of our building's a little bit unique, just because we moved into a pre-existing space. So I'll just sort of jump all over the place in the tour. But as we leave the tasting room, and before we go into the production facility, which is in front of us here, we have our fancy barrel storage room over here. So we'll walk in here, we'll see some of the barrels that are doing their work and having all sorts of fun. So in here, we basically have a humidity and temperature controlled room where we store all of our whiskey barrels, all of our other unique projects that require barrel aging that we have going on here. So a variety of different formats and sizes of American oak right now. We don't have any French in here currently, but yeah, and we do some head stacking and some basically side stacking for our barrel profile.
And for your guys' bourbon, it's aged at a minimum of how many years?
So just over 1 year in the 15 gallons. So you can see here we have 3 sizes of barrels in this room. So what we're looking at right now, this is a 15-gallon American oak barrel. We have, let's see, we'll walk further back here. We have 30s basically all the way back on this wall. And then as we move forward here, we also have the 53s that we're starting to stack up as well. So we're basically doing a progressive aging strategy where we're using small barrels, they're basically higher influence of oak, faster, less margin, just because they're as expensive as the big barrels. And so we basically, the way we view it is we kind of trade time for cost with the small barrels. But we are moving into medium size here this year. So we exclusively 30-gallon at 2 years, and then the 53s are sort of our we're calling it our 3+ program. So we're working into those as well. So all concurrent aging, and we kind of fill those individual barrel sizes as needed to kind of keep our production flowing. So yeah. So anyways, all right. So let's get out of this room here, and we can go into the production area. So tasting room. And now to where the magic happens. So we'll start by talking about fermentation, because that's basically the start of the production of alcohol. So just quickly, the layout of our distillery, we have basically a production wall where we have 3 distillation systems. We have kind of furthest over there, and I'll get closer to that in a little bit after we talk about fermentation, but we have our basically 2-column distillation system designed for vodka primarily, but we also do some whiskey on that as well. We have the 600-gallon still here. This is predominantly used for basically the separation of alcohol from fermentable mash. And so as we ferment and then get the alcohol away from the wort of the mash, we use the bigger still to do that separation. And then we have a small finishing still over here that we use, and we use this still for our gin, our lime vodka, as well as our bourbon. Sorry, not our bourbon, our absinthe that we produce here. So let's talk about fermentation. So fermentation, we basically start by getting grains from the Sacramento Valley. So we get, a lot of times we get corn. We're predominantly use corn for our fermentable material. And what we'll do is we'll cook that corn in this facility here, and then we ferment it using a couple different varieties of yeast, but for the most part, a really nice neutral yeast here. And what will happen is our ferments will go into one of these three, whether it's the bigger tank or one of the smaller tanks here, and basically allow for the yeast to convert sugars into alcohol, which then will distill into one of our products. So you can see we have a couple ferments going here. We can open the lid on this. These are about at the end of their life, but those are 200% corn fermentations that are going on side by side. We'll start to process these tomorrow.
Cool.
And then from there it can go into a variety of different product paths. Just depends on what our needs are in the facility from a product perspective. So yeah, so I'll just do another pan over. So again, 50-gallon 4-plate basket is our smallest still. The 600-gallon still is a hybrid, basically a hybrid pot with a 4-plate column on it. And then we have the 150-gallon system, which is 4 and 16 split. So it's basically a 20-plate distillation system when it's operating using both towers. So you can kind of see floor to ceiling there. And yeah, and then everything else, like most distilleries, there's a lot of raw materials and storage that we have. So we have like corn in the wall, we have glass, we have all sorts of fun stuff. So any questions about the production facility?
Is all of your spirit corn based, or is there any other
Yeah, so right now, everything that we make, with the exception of the bourbon, is made from Sacramento corn.
Okay.
So yeah, so like the vodka is from local non-GMO corn. The lime vodka, the gin, the absinthe all start off basically the same way. And then the way that we process them changes based on, their different individual product needs. So yeah, they kind of all start the same, and then they become different things through different production methods and processes. So, and then the whiskey program requires us to, I guess you could make 100% corn whiskey and call it a bourbon, but in our case, we use between 4 and 5 grains in our bourbon program. So we're using corn, rye, wheat, and barley. And because bourbon is predominantly a corn spirit, we're using just over the required 51% of corn in that recipe, and then about 45% of other grains for the remaining part of the fermentation recipe. So.
And so the column stills, you were saying you have one that can go up to 20. Is that correct?
Yes, that's this one here. Yeah.
What exactly are like the benefits of going all the way to 20, let's say, versus only using maybe like 4?
Yeah, it really has to do with the effective separation of alcohol. So basically the way that distillation works fundamentally is we're separating different compounds, different basically molecular structures by their different boiling points. Alcohol has a lower boiling point than water. And so that basically when we're putting any alcohol solution into one of our kettles of our distillation systems, and we're heating it to a range where we can make the alcohol become a steam while leaving the heavier compounds such as water behind.
Got it.
And so so basically once you get to your blended boiling point, it's normal especially like in pot distillation, you're going to get some water that comes over along with the alcohol. And so if you're running a pot still, it's really hard to create a highly pure alcohol, because the water cannot just as easily separate in a pot versus a column. What the column is doing, I kind of describe it as it's a number of basically gates that the alcohol has to pass through before it can become into the product. So as it's basically boiling here, so basically our blended boiling point here, which is our water and alcohol mixture solution, has to basically become a steam down here in the kettle. And then that steam gets pushed into these plates is what they're called. And
Mm-hmm.
each of these plates slows down the flow of the steam distillate that's coming up through the column. So it's basically got to stop here, and it's got to be able to pass through these little portholes inside this column, and then continue to be light enough structure to this one, to this one, to this one. And then it goes back down and it passes through all these. So you can imagine if water's heavier than alcohol, then by the time that alcohol and water combined steam passes through all these different plates, the water is going to get too heavy to actually stay attached to the alcohol and fall off. And it's actually going to drain back into the kettle, while the pure alcohol will pass through the very top, and then we'll refrigerate that back down into a liquid and then capture it. So that's how we can bake basically 96%, or as a high proof of alcohol as possible without using pressure differentials or anything like that. So yeah, so anyway, so this is basically for making vodka, you have to be able to distill material to 190 proof or higher. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what this system allows us to do. Is basically each plate is basically stripping away a tiny bit of water, and purifying just the pure alcohol as it comes through. And then it gets refrigerated down and we capture that pure alcohol in our condensing receiving tank. So that's the reason they're important. And that's why you need a decent amount of plates in your distillation system. We probably could do it with less, but again, you might have to just use more actual distillation runs to achieve the same result. So like if you put a lot of plates into a single system, then you can take a medium strength alcohol solution and separate the alcohol effectively by pushing it through additional plates. So it just makes honestly, it just makes the process a little bit more streamlined in terms of taking a medium strength alcohol that's already been distilled twice and turning it into a highly purified alcohol that we then use as the source of our multiple products that we make, including our vodka.
Got it. And so with that recondensed alcohol, are you then taking that and then that's what you're macerating with your limes for the lime vodka, and then also incorporating your botanicals for gin, or is that also in a completely separate process?
No, there's a couple intermediate steps that happen after the distillation process. There's just a resting process that happens after distillation, and there's a proofing process, because using a 192 proof spirit for any sort of infusion or redistillation is really not that effective. It'll you need to basically dilute the strength of the alcohol back down to find the right balance and potency of alcohol for material to infuse and basically distill well again.
Okay.
And so we basically take that really high proof alcohol and we bring down the strength slowly, and then do our modifications depending on whatever product that we're focusing on making. So
got it.
Yeah. Well, okay, and then back here, I'll just take us back to our lab area. So
yes, you guys have such a fun lab.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit in shambles right now, but this is basically where we do R&D testing. It's sort of a combination right now between a lab and a commercial kitchen. So that's something we've been toying with, trying to get up and running, which is the ability to serve food in here. And it's something that we're continuing to work with the city on, but it's going to take a little bit of time. But so over here we have basically a lot of lab glass and small distilling systems. And then right across we have our pizza oven. So lots of fun stuff there. So so that's essentially the tour. Is there any and then you can see it just circles nicely right back into our tasting room here. So
perfect.
do the nice full circle.
Yeah, perfect.
So yeah.
No, I don't think I have any more questions around the tour. I'm sure I'll have more questions when we get to tasting about just kind of the R&D process and flavors and how you guys have landed on the flavors you have
Sure.
for your gin and absinthe and whatnot. So I'm
Yeah.
excited for that.
Cool.
Cool.
Well, then to the world, thank you for joining us today. And then Lindsay, I'll talk to you again in a little bit and we'll do some tastings.
Hey Josh, thanks so much for joining me today for the tasting. I'm really excited to taste through some of Young Yonder Spirits. So I'm going to hand it over to you and you can get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everybody. My name is Josh Opatz. I'm one of the owners here at Young Yonder Spirits in Hillsburg, which is located in Sonoma County, California, just north of San Francisco. Today, we're going to be trying 3 of our 5 spirits in our portfolio, just to be considerate of all your time out there. So we're going to talk about the gin, the bourbon, and the absinthe. And I'm going to basically taste and talk through the process of each of these and the botanicals and why we made them the way they are. So Lindsay, feel free to ask me any questions along the way, but we'll go ahead and start with Hobbs Gin.
Perfect.
So Hobbs Gin is a basically contemporary style gin made with 8 botanicals. So what makes gin is the use of juniper as the predominant essence and character of the spirit, along with other botanicals. So we have basically in this recipe, juniper as the foundation of the spirit. So basically staying consistent with the heritage and history of the class of this product. To brighten it up and modernize it, we use a lot of citrus and floral. So there's lemon peel, there's hibiscus and lavender, there's cardamom, which we use for a spice component. And then we also use some of the classics like a coriander, angelic root, and then we throw a little bit of bay leaf in there. So 8 botanicals all in all. 100 proof, so it's a little bit of a higher proof alcohol than most gins in the marketplace. You'll find gins ranging traditionally from 80 to 92 proof. We toyed with the idea of doing a Navy strength gin as the gin that we would have in our core portfolio, but it just was a little too hot at 114 proof. So we looked for a balance between 80 proof and 114 proof. And after just doing some bench testing, found that 100 proof actually was a nice balance between having alcohol presence, but then also keeping the botanicals bright and present in the spirit as well. So without it getting too flabby. So again, as you taste it, you basically have, on the nose, you get basically a lot of juniper, lemon. And then as you taste it, you get more of the cardamom, the citrus, and then a little bit of the floral attributes as well. So what's nice about this gin is you can basically use it to make like if you're a gin, kind of a gin traditionalist, you can use this gin as a good martini gin. Just shake it, add a lemon twist to it, should be all set. We also
citrus notes are really a nice add to it. It really makes it almost kind of like their oils make it a little buttery almost.
Yeah, there's a little bit of viscosity, yeah, for sure, and that's partly the distillation method that we use. So even though we have the capability to produce like a London dry style gin where we push everything through all the botanical influence through a basket in the distillation process, we're doing a direct maceration. So we're actually have the botanicals in the kettle cooking with the alcohol. And so it's giving a really rich flavor extraction. So as it's distilling, it's carrying over a lot of these botanical oils that contribute to like a rich and velvety character, like viscosity in the spirit. So
yeah,
really popular SKU for us. It's done really well out there. It's pretty versatile. Again, it's got a lot of character to it. So it's definitely a gin drinker's gin. You have to like juniper. You have to be into some of the customary characteristics of gin to, I think, to really enjoy this. But again, like with a lot of our spirits, it's like, how do we balance modernization with paying respect to tradition? And so again, that juniper foundation is still the backbone of the spirit, but modernize, I think, with the other botanicals that we throw in, and also the distillation method that we use to distill this. So, and then Hobbs is interesting. So I'll put the label forward. So this is basically artwork done in-house by my wife, Sarah. And the label is basically a fine line drawing of what we call the life of a sailor. And so we wanted to basically, in researching of gin, wanted to pay tribute to the fact that gin became popular really originally from the Dutch in the Netherlands, who invented a product called Genever, which is sort of like mixing whiskey and gin. It's not as popular. Not as popular these days, but it's still something that's made over in the Netherlands today. And so started off as Genever. The Dutch carried it on their mercantile ships, and when they were trading with other Western European countries, this would get exposed, and that's how the English found it and made it to what it is today, which is gin. So it's got like interesting thing about gin as well is it was provisioned on English naval ships for hundreds of years as part of daily sailor provisions. And so like there's a lot of foundational history in gin being kind of maritime or naval oriented. And so they kind of the whole history and name and drawing ties into you know, the story that gin originated from.
Right, because Hobbs is like an acronym for, is it Harbor of Broken Souls? Is that what it
Harbor
was?
of Broken Souls, yes. Yeah. And it's yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's it's basically just something that we came across when we were researching the history of gin. This whole story about gin and tying to kind of just early naval warfare, and so we wanted to pay tribute to it in kind of a I guess like a sombering but interesting way. And so anyways, that's came up with the name Hobbs. And I
absolutely love this artwork. The doodler in me wants to color it in like with really fine colored pencils.
We have talked numerous times about rubber banding like a 3-pack of pencils onto this package.
You should 100%. I think it would be so much fun. I mean, especially to see what people come up with, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's one of those things where we've talked about it for years and never done anything, but maybe one day we'll actually execute on an idea. Like there's a couple bars that carry this that have done that behind the bar, where they've basically taken the monochromatic theme that it has and colored it in with like really bright colors and just a lot of elements to make it really interesting. But yeah, so it happens out there in the world. It's just not anything that we necessarily promote in any way.
Right.
But, we like the label as it is, but
it's
definitely
label.
something that you could dress up with some color if your heart so desires. So.
Nice.
So cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna just do a little water rinse out here. I'll get the gin washed out and down, and then we'll go to the bourbon next.
Perfect.
Okay. So the next up, this is our Young Yonder bourbon. This is a high rye bourbon, so it's a little bit different from other bourbons in the fact that we use less corn and more rye content than a traditional bourbon mash. There's 5 grains in this particular bottle that we both have in front of us here. It's made from corn, 2 types of rye, wheat, and barley. It's distilled twice. It's aged in brand new small American oak barrels for 13 months. And then it's proofed down to 91 proof, is just where it lives in the bottle. So let's see here. So first off, I guess I'll mention quickly, because this is the first product that's going into our modernized package. So at least I'll mention, because this has traditionally been recognized in the market as a stave robber bourbon. And we're going through a brand integration process right now. We're actually just simplifying our branding to Young Yonder. So you can see here this new package, what you'll be seeing a lot more of if you're looking for our products in the marketplace. And it really just allows us to focus on our own story of being kind of corporate people turned entrepreneurs and so forth, and the name of Young Yonder. So basically the way we do this is we start off with those 5 grains. We mash on site here, get those grains processed down. We do a kind of a low and slow ferment on this with mash basically in the fermentation. So it's a lot of additional flavor and extraction that's happening during fermentation. Low and slow in terms of keeping the temperature and profile and the nutrients happy, so that it ferments really nice with some really great whiskey flavors. We then double distill it. So we do a stripping run, and then we do our spirits run on this. Take really conservative cuts on the top and bottom to make sure that what goes into the barrel is a really clean alcohol. It ages in our storage room that we talked about earlier for just over a year. We use temperature and humidity to make sure that the barrels are happy and the spirit's happy while it's aging in that facility. And then, and then we pull it out and we bring it down to 91 proof slowly, so it doesn't shock the spirit as it's going through that transition from barrel strength to bottle strength.
And is that what you mean by non-chill filtered on the bottle? What exactly does that mean?
No, yeah, that's more of just an ode to us being small batch producers. So in big production facilities, like big brand whiskey facilities, they'll use chill filtration to basically to push out any potential haze or protein buildup that could accumulate in the spirit once it's bottled. And so using temperature as basically a way to increase the density of slightly increase the density of the alcohol, it makes it easier to filter out particulates and material that might form in the bottle. And so our view is just to take it at ambient temperature, to do just a really basic filtration on it to remove any particulates from the barrel that could have gotten into the liquid when we were aging it, but leave a lot of its fundamental character into the spirit and then into the bottle. So in chill filtering, you'll lose some of that some of that just material that would otherwise get filtered out. So it's just a way to leave more flavor and profile in the bottle at the end of the day. So so in terms of character here, so this has got a decent amount of rye. So like whenever people come to the tasting room and I talk about this spirit, I let them know that it's not your high corn sweet bourbon. This is like a drier, more spicy style bourbon because of the rye content. Still a bourbon, which means basically it still has at least 51% corn in the recipe, but not much above that. So it's, again, a high rye format. So you get some of that, basically the rye spice. You get a lot of oak character, which is pretty custom or pretty traditional for bourbon because they're all brand new barrels that they age in. You get a little bit of heat, which is nice from the 91 proof that comes through. But overall, we think a really balanced spirit. It really works well for cocktails. So like Manhattans and Old Fashions, we make a lot of here in our tasting room bar. And this has enough structure and flavor to really hold up in cocktails, which is really nice. It's not so light that when you hit it with anything, it kind of fades away.
The flavor goes away.
Right. This has got a lot of backbone. So it'll basically, you'll still have like a nice balance of flavors, even if you use it, as a mixing component in a cocktail. So. Any questions, Lindsay?
You said you use 2 types of rye.
We do.
Can you tell me what those types are?
I can.
Okay.
Yeah. So this product, as it's made today, has a equal part blend of unmalted rye and malted rye, and that allows us to get 2 different kind of characteristics and profiles from the rye grain itself. So it's more traditional to use unmalted rye when making distilled spirits in general. They're a little bit harder to work with. It's a more cost-efficient way to approach it. So a lot of people use the unmalted as the core for any sort of rye, whether it's a high rye bourbon or just a rye whiskey. We wanted to basically cut that with some malted rye, which has a little bit more, just a little bit more like cooking spice and kind of warming notes because it's gone through a malting process, which requires
it definitely
kilning.
has like a not baked bread, but it has like that warm baked bread. Like that's the only way I can really describe it. So it definitely has like that toasted quality to it.
Yeah. So but we make this in pretty small batches. So this is a product that we actually we produce. we produce enough to basically support the tasting room and a couple of key wholesale accounts. But we're, you know, just being realistic with who we are and what we're capable of doing. We produce this in really small batches, and we barrel down a couple times a year into bottling runs. And yeah, and it's just the size of our facility allows us to make enough to support our club, our tasting room, and local accounts. But this is not necessarily like a big brand product by any means. This is like a kind of tasting room primarily, with some key wholesale local accounts that we use to support it. And it allows us to take some of the pressure off of the production timeline. So this is a product that, you know, sometimes we'll sell out of, and it's gives me heartburn, but it's, you know, it's just something that we have to live with. And so, yeah, and so basically we make this a more of an exclusive sort of in-house and local product.
Nice.
And it's just, again, like, I think for our capacity and for all of our different SKUs that we produce, it's the right amount of volume that we're able to justify as a small business. So.
And with the aging process, obviously there is loss that's associated with that due to evaporation. But do you feel like you've got that, I don't want to say like down to a minimum, but fairly well controlled given the temperature and humidity that you guys have like narrowed down for the cellar?
For sure, yeah. So they're definitely, so because the room, or the kind of the barrel storage room is, it fluctuates in terms of humidity and temperature. So it still has the traditional angel share evaporative effects happening in the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think the way we're controlling it allows for us to minimize. It's not even about minimizing the loss. It's about just doing the right thing to create the right extraction of the wood in the spirit. So like, I don't worry about as much as loss as I worry about building harsh character in the product from the barrels getting too dry or too hot or whatever it may be. So I think those are like, it's like less about the volume loss and more about what's the right thing to do for the best quality product that we can make. And so that's how we think of the controlling factors as really mitigants for product quality versus loss. But the loss is definitely, it's minimized to some degree through that process as well. So some of them go hand in hand. I mean, like heat and dryness are both, yeah, they both contribute to loss in some regard. It just depends on what you're trying to do exactly. We can go into a deep dive on that, but we'll save that for another conversation.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
Barrel chemistry is interesting in and of itself. So
yeah, it is really interesting. I'm very, very limited knowledge, but from what I've learned, it's crazy how much of it's, you know, expanding and shrinking plays such a drastic role, and can really turn a flavor quickly.
Yeah, it's just part of best practices to do a spirit like this is to use those environmental factors to your advantage to create the best quality product you can. So, but yeah, like I said, a conversation for another day when we have hours to talk.
More time. Yeah.
So I'll just do a little water rinse here, and then we can do the absinthe, which is the next one that takes me.
Perfect.
All right. So this is our Fellows and Foragers Absinthe. This is the probably within the next 3 months, this label will go into the Young and Yonder archives, and then it'll look a little bit more like this here.
Okay.
But Absinthe is a high-proof herbal spirit. It's made with aniseed, fennel, and wormwood traditionally. And so it gets a licorice savory character from those components. It's semi-similar to making gin at least in the concept that the botanicals dictate the class. Like the botanicals that we use make absinthe. And then everything that we use outside of the traditional botanicals make it our own, so to speak. So like when you're talking about gin, you're talking about juniper plus other things. When you're talking about absinthe, you're talking about aniseed, fennel, and wormwood plus other things. And that's
Right.
basically how you make absinthe unique and different from other brands on the shelf. So there's 11 botanicals overall in this particular spirit. So high proof herbal spirit, it has definitely minty and citrusy and black licorice character. So in addition to the customary three, we also have some star anise. We have lemon peel. We have coriander seeds. We have let's see, ginger roots that go into the base, the actual like distilling process part of the product. And then what
Okay.
makes this particular absinthe unique, basically it's a subclass of the absinthe category, is we do a post-distillation infusion.
Oh.
And so the reason it has color is because after we distilled this, which all distilled spirits basically are clear when they're distilled because color doesn't volatilize in distillation. We add peppermint, tarragon, eucalyptus, lemongrass, and more aniseed to the spirit after distillation, and we soak it like a tea. So imagine making like a iced tea where you're basically cold soaking your tea with your water and you're getting this nice extraction. We're basically doing that with absinthe to give it some additional, more subtle, organic, infused characteristics and color.
Oh,
and so,
cool.
yeah, so absinthe is traditionally a higher strength spirit. So you can see them in the marketplace anywhere from 120 proof up to 175, 180 proof.
Wow.
We chose to kind of keep it on the lower end. I describe our absinthe as a gateway absinthe. It's not super medicinal, which is one of those areas where we broke tradition. So absinthe was originally designed as a alcohol-based medicinal remedy. And so alcohol is basically the vessel to extract different botanicals and herbs for perceived health benefits. And so that's the origin of the spirit. And so it's described as a medicinal alcohol in its origin. And so a lot of absinthe in the marketplace have a highly medicinal attribute to them because when you're talking about really high strength alcohol, it's really easy to over extract botanical flavor and create bitter kind of tannic elements that just are, they're just more medicinal tasting, for lack of a better term. So we tried to minimize that in this spirit, like again, keep the customary approach of using the traditional ingredients, but then modernizing it by not focusing on it being as medicinal and heavy and focusing on it using like the peppermint, the tarragon, the citrus, which we get through the coriander and the lemon peel to like brighten it up and create a balance between the licorice or that really comes from the anise, the star and seed anise, and then the citrus and the mintiness from it. The ginger contributes a little bit of a spice component, which we thought was interesting as well. But yeah, overall, again, 11 botanicals. It's a two-stage production process of direct maceration distilling and then a post-distillation infusion. And then we also proof this down slowly and then put it into the bottle at 120 proof.
How long did it take for you guys to finalize this recipe? I mean, that's a lot of botanicals, and I feel like R&D must have taken a long time to really finalize and hone in on the final recipe. Yeah,
so with all spirits, they tend to start at sort of the lab and theoretical level. So, like for our own internal recipe development process, we do kind of a understanding of the history of a particular class of spirit that we're exploring doing. Then we understand the historical production methods that were used to create the spirit over time in history. And then we look at how do we then look at this body of information and adjust it to make it our own and to make it more relevant to modern day cocktail and spirits consumers. And so what we'll do is, so again, after we get through all of the kind of the computer and book research, we'll start formulating, at very small levels, different concepts. So basically kind of thinking like, what I've evolved to do over time is start to think of the flavor hierarchy and the flavor structure before I actually look at botanicals,
Hmm.
and think of like how I would want to describe the spirit when it's done, and
Interesting.
then find botanicals that help promote the vision of the product that's being made. So when we first started, like when I started with the gin, which is one of our first products, I had I would call a bottom up approach, where it was like, okay, let's make gin. Let's try sarsaparilla. Let's try, like ginseng root. Let's try like 100 different things, and then just see like how it tastes, right? And that's definitely an approach. And I don't have any like any lesser respect for that bottom up approach than the top down. But what we found was it was just a really tenuous process to not have a clear vision of what you want before you start.
Right.
And then to sort of like try to build a recipe from the ground up, I think is much harder than just building a vision of what you're looking for and then make the recipe fit your vision.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of all leading into the production time. So like when I did the gin, it was bottoms up. It was a year and a half of bench trial distillations and about 125, 150 bench trials
Wow.
to figure out kind of what worked and what didn't.
Sure.
And it wasn't until it was probably, honestly, we're slow learners here, about the 100th distillation, I was like, yeah, we have to figure out a smarter way.
A different way to do this next time.
So by the time we got to the absinthe, like it was, again, I think it followed like the more current practice that we employ when we're thinking about the distilled spirit product, which is like, what class is it? What's the history of the class? What is the traditional method that's been made prior? What are the traditional botanicals or ingredients that have been used up to this point? And then how can we put like our own personal twist, whether it's like, are we using a unique yeast strain? Are we using a unique source of raw materials? Are we using a unique botanical set to differentiate the product in the marketplace? And so with the absinthe, it took about a year. And what I've found with just for my own capacity and just with everything else we have going on here is, I think it takes about a year to produce something that's been vetted and that's basically stable over time, and that's something that has the right profile. It just takes an iterative experimentation process and some time to pull off. So the absinthe took about a year end to end to put together, and then formulate kind of in lockstep the brand vision as well to parallel with what the product should be. And so that's sort of what we're doing now. So each year we look at different interests and classes that we want to explore. We do research, we do bench trials, and then we spin up that product, whether it becomes ultimately like a limited release type of product or a kind of a core product. It just depends on what we're making. But yeah, so that's a long-winded answer to your question of how long does it take. So
no, I think it's really interesting, especially learning or originally starting from the bottom up and now kind of looking at it as a top-down approach. I think I like the top-down approach. I think that makes a lot of sense, right? If you kind of know what the vision is, what you want the end product to look and taste like, what you're hoping to accomplish, it probably is relatively faster to accomplish that versus all the trial and error from the bottom up.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many unique botanicals and flavors in the world. I mean, you can spend the rest of your life like seeking out all these really unique and awesome and rare botanicals and trying to incorporate. But again, I think if you don't have a clear vision of what you're looking to do, you can just get lost in that. And I think when I made the gin, I got lost. Like I was sort of lost in just like the world of diverse flavors and not really thinking about like, what is it that we're trying to accomplish, and then work from that angle. And so, so moving forward, we've been like, I think a little bit more concrete on like what the foundational attributes of the product are. And then, it still takes trial and error. It's like, you can't just write down a recipe on paper as like what you think will work and then just assume it'll work. Like it's still a very iterative, like, because like the compounding element of when you mix botanicals together creates unique character that you don't think of in isolation. So you think of like lemon peel and cardamom. Like I easily like think about those flavors independently, but when you merge them, like there's kind of like a tertiary flavor that's there that makes basically the botanical structure and profile unique. And so it's like kind of like, if you look at a Venn diagram, it's the center between the two circles
all
where
of
it
it.
gets, yeah. And so like in like tweaking the elements of all these different botanicals, so like the structure and the balance and the flavor all works, is I think that's where the art really comes into the process. And so it still takes a lot of time, even if you have a very clear vision going into it, to
of course.
So,
Well, I get the ginger on my palate with this. It definitely packs a punch for sure. It's fun though, especially like I'm not a big licorice eater by any means, but I do enjoy natural licorice flavors. So star anise, fennel, all of those. And so it's a fun opportunity to like embrace that in a different format. And this one is nice, though it is a little hot for sure from the ginger.
Yeah, and it's also like, even in the tasting room here, it's the one spirit where we actually recommend using some ice in the tasting. Like usually, for whatever reason, I mean, well, there are reasons, but if you put ice into a spirit in a tasting room, it's sort of like considered to be like that you're trying to hide something. It's temperature, like a lower temperature can mask off flavors. And so traditionally we try to serve everything at room temperature. Because this is 120 proof, we do recommend a couple ice cubes in the tasting glass when we serve this in the tasting room, because you want two things to happen, which are important, which is when you add ice to your tasting, what you're doing is you are primarily diluting the strength of the alcohol from 120 down to like a more palatable range, whether, it's like one ice cube and it brings it down to 100, or it's two ice cubes and it brings it down to 80, 70 proof. It also allows for the botanicals that are tied up with the alcohol to basically separate and become more pronounced. And so this is a process called luching, and it's customary in absinthe, but it can be done in any botanical spirit if it's packed with enough botanical oils. And it's basically the concept that if you dilute the alcohol content down enough in a spirit with botanical oils, the botanical oils will separate from the alcohol and basically become their own entity in that glass. And so it creates a cloudiness effect, and that's basically the separation process happening. That's what basically, so luching is this process of using a dilution mechanism, which is primarily, ice and water in our case, to lower the alcohol content, which in turns pushes the botanical oils that are bound to the alcohol away and into the glass, which change the profile of the spirit a little bit. So it's really interesting. If you ever want to do a side-by-side at home, is to keep a tasting of absinthe at basically room temperature without any dilution, and then take the same sample pour, put 1 or 2 ice cubes in it, let it sit for 5 minutes, and then compare them side to side, and you'll see a flavor development change, because again, the botanicals separating from the alcohol create more nuance and character, and it'll take away the alcohol potency, which sometimes masks your ability to detect flavor. And so those are two things to consider. So again, that's why when we serve it, we usually wouldn't do this neat at room temperature unless it was requested by our guests to do so. So
I dropped a few little drops of water in there, and it does really change it. It definitely, I could see even the natural oil separation kind of initially take place, but it really, it does open up the flavor, especially on your palate.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a fun spirit. Again, it's like, I guess I knew this, but like, it's a much more polarizing spirit than I think I anticipated. It's got a kind of a lot of urban legend behind it, which kind of is perceived in a negative light. And so the first thing that we hear is like, is absinthe even legal to make? Which yes, it is.
Yes,
and then the second is like whether people appreciate a natural licorice character or not. So some people just can't stand it, won't even try it, and that's okay. Like, we have a diverse portfolio for that reason, but some people, I like with vodka and gin and whiskey, I think there's like more of a scaled range of whether you like something or not. And it's somehow with absinthe, it's like, it's more binary. It's like, it's a yes or no. It's like, I love it or I hate it. And it's like, and that's fine either way. Like, we have a diverse portfolio for that reason.
I feel like a lot of those herbal forward spirits, people either love them or like, no, I'm good, I'm gonna pass.
Right.
So I think it's just interesting, and I think I feel like the licorice, you know, for example, my mother loved black licorice, like it was her go-to candy, but I think generationally, like those flavors didn't transfer, you know, like there are some things that just don't, you know, decade over decade don't continue on. And I think black licorice is one of them. But I do think it's a really nice soft introduction, because like I couldn't even imagine having 185 proof absinthe. That sounds like rocket fuel, frankly.
Yeah,
but
you have to go to Eastern Europe for that.
Yeah, I like the idea of it, of like, you know, having it as an add. Like, I think it would be a delicious flavor, like in addition to another aspect of a cocktail.
Yeah, and like we have a you know, a vertically integrated Sazerac here on our cocktail menu in our tasting room, and like just taking our whiskey and adding a botanical complexity to it using the absinthe is like a really fun way to explore. It doesn't use a lot of absinthe, but it's a way to use the unique flavor structure in a way in a cocktail to diversify it. We also have a couple of absinthe cocktails, so if you're ever in the tasting room, we can show you ways where you can fall in love with absinthe. It just takes a little bit of hand holding, I think, for the most
I know.
part, so.
I think you guys made an absinthe cocktail at the first distillery festival, and it was by far and away the most favorite cocktail anybody was having. I mean, like I still get rave reviews about that absinthe cocktail. So I know that you guys are mixing up delicious stuff for sure.
For sure. So, and then for anyone who's interested in visiting us here in Hillsburg, we also, in addition to these 3 spirits, we make 2 types of vodka, and we're going to be releasing an Amaro very soon as well. So we have a pretty diverse portfolio of products for people to come in and try. So even if you're a gin enthusiast and you're not big on whiskey or vodka, you can come in and try the gin, have a gin cocktail. If you want to try a really diverse range of spirits, we offer that here as well. So yeah, there's a lot to come and learn about, and we're pretty nice for the most part, and we love questions and to teach people about how we make alcohol and craft distilled spirits. So yeah, so we definitely encourage, you know, people coming on tours and coming in and getting cocktails and coming and doing tastings and allowing us to really talk through how each of these are made, as we've done on this virtual conference here. So
yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was so much fun. Always great to chat.
Yeah, to you as well, Lindsay. Thank you so much.
I'll talk to you real soon, Josh.
All right, take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi everyone, this is Josh Opatz with Young Yonder Spirits, and today we are going to be working on making a Southside cocktail. So the Southside cocktail is a gin cocktail that uses a fresh lime juice. It usually uses fresh mint, but we're going to use a fresh mint simple syrup instead, and then we're going to garnish it with some dehydrated limes today. So to make this cocktail, this is a shaken cocktail. So to make this cocktail, we're going to need a shaker set. We're going to need a jigger to measure our ingredients. We're going to need a strainer, and for an extra appearance, we're going to use a double strainer as well. So to go to make this cocktail, what we're going to do is we're going to take our shaker. We are going to take 1.5 ounces of our Hobbs Gin, like such. We're going to pour that in our shaker. We are going to take 1/2 ounce of our mint simple. And finally, we're going to take 3/4 ounce of our fresh lime juice. Now we have all the ingredients in our tin. We're going to add some ice to this. So basically what the ice will do is will allow for us to cool down all these ingredients It'll oxidize the lime citrus to make it a little more brighter. And then it won't dilute the cocktail any further once we strain it out into the cocktail. Okay, so now we got it nice and cold. We're gonna go ahead and open up our tin. We're gonna put our strainer over our tin here, and then we're gonna use our double strainer just to catch any particulates. In this case, there's not much in there because we're using liquids. We're gonna go ahead and just fill up our coupe glass just below the rim, a little bit of room to pick it up and sip it. And then we're gonna garnish it today with one of our house-made dehydrated limes. So a little dehydrated lime right on the top, and now you have a ready-to-drink Southside cocktail. Enjoy.